But this is what I find kind of fascinating about the situation with the Texans and Nico Collins and what his season has been like. Because we spend a lot of time talking about the frustration with Nick Caley, the frustration with D'Amico Ryans appearing to not have a grasp about offense, and the frustration with Nick Caserio for the team he's built. Sometimes there's frustration with the quarterback. Sometimes there's frustration with the running backs. But the guy who's regarded as arguably the biggest baller on the team, we talk about Brian Thomas Jr., and there's just no hesitation as to how disappointing he's been. But when you line him up side by side by what Nico Collins has done this year, it's actually kind of discouraging when you actually look at it. Again, we all know Brian Thomas Jr. sucked this year. Very well documented. It's talked about quite often. We all know this. We all know he sucked. Nico Collins has not produced either. He's falling off almost to the degree that Tank Dell did last year with Bobby Slowick. And last year it was damn it, Bobby. Now it's Nick Caley. Nick. So let's just look at this. Let's just get some perspective on this. The receptions, there's a difference of 3. Nico Collins is +3. The targets. So we look at the targets. Brian Thomas Jr. supposedly dropping a lot of balls. He only has 3 more targets than Nico Collins. He has 420 yards to Nico's 414. He's averaging 14 yards a catch to Nico Collins, 12.5. They both have around the same long. Now, Nico Collins has more touchdowns. Brian Thomas has more 20-plus yard catches. But Nico Collins is wide receiver 3.5. Brian Thomas is wide receiver 3.9. Nico Collins is one of the top 4 guys in fantasy that is on last place teams that you find on last place teams. He hasn't been good. And is that a Nico thing? Is it a Nick Caley thing? It's a problem regardless. Because none of us think that Nico Collins can't play. But that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. Whether it means you force feed him a little bit more, whether it means that there's got to be more catchable balls, whether it means that you throw it to him quickly to kind of mask your offense, the square peg round hole, which is kind of Nick Caley's identity, that's unacceptable. For a guy as good as Nico Collins to be producing like one of the biggest disappointments in the NFL is that we already regard. And maybe we're just not paying enough attention to it, but something's got to give when it comes to that. And I don't think it's all his fault, but it's a fucking disgrace, quite frankly, that Nico Collins with this offense is not something that they're leaning on more and figuring out creative ways to get things going. I know DJ Bieneme of ESPN was focused on the motion a lot. I know simps like us look at targets and all that. Whatever it is, get the guy involved. There's no excuse for that. Like we're talking. Okay, you can't get Jalen Noel involved. It's pathetic, but you can't get him involved. Okay, Woody Marks, you hate rookies. Okay, so you can't get Woody Marks involved, and you would rather just fart up the middle with Nick Chubb. Okay, whatever. This is Nico Collins, brother. This ain't no rookie. This is supposed to be a top 10 receiver in the league. So if he's regressing on your watch, that's embarrassing. There was not one time last year. There was not one time last year with how bad things got with Bobby Slowick.
Damn it, Bobby.
There was not one time last year where we sat there and said, man, Nico going to be a non-factor. He's going to disappear. Offense fell apart when he was gone for a month. Then it came back. He was still balling out. Nico Collins was still that dude. He doesn't even have the dudes looking like dudes. Nick Caley. Joe Mixon balled out in that crappy offense that got Bobby Slowick fired. Nico Collins was doing his thing. Tank Dell fell off. But that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. We've talked a lot about Jalen Noel. rightfully so, but it's unacceptable that Nico Collins in this offense is all of a sudden, there's times where they're just asking him to block. And they say they put him in motion. It's half-ass motion. You go look at it. It's half-ass motion. So they need to get him involved. Period, point blank, end of story. Can you count on Nico Collins? We're going to the baller roll call. Can you count on Nico Collins? He's dependent on other things. I feel like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, they can kind of control it themselves. Derek Stingley, he can do his thing, and they don't have any receivers. Nico Collins is dependent on a lot of things. This Sunday, he's dependent on a backup quarterback. He's dependent on a depleted offensive line, and he's depleted on an offensive coordinator who makes him look like one of the biggest disappointments in the NFL. Get it together, make it easy. You have to do two-step drops and just swing it to him. Just do that. Get the ball in his effing hands. Nico Collins should touch the ball at least 12 to 14 times in some way, shape, or form. And not that bullshit flip pass that Nick Caley ran in the red zone. What in the F was that? But this is unacceptable. We've directed our attention. I don't want to say misdirected, but we've looked at a lot of things. But the most obvious thing and the most obvious disgrace that shows how bad Nick Caley has been what he's turned Nico Collins into. That's got to change.